So I'm sorry that took as long as it did. Even I have issues with flash drives, whatever, sometimes too. So hopefully the rest of today will go a little bit smoother than the beginning of today. What we're going to talk about is actually creating your first portfolio. You've probably all had a chance to kind of read through assignment 108, so you kind of know what's expected. For exercise 114, we're going to get the initial kind of layout started. By no means is this your final complete layout. I suspect that it will change. I have an example up here of one of my early trial run portfolios. This was my grad school portfolio. It doesn't have a cover on it yet because I was still playing around with things. I think this was iteration 3 of my portfolio. I should go back and see if I can dig out the earlier ones. The final version was number 7 or 8. So this is an actual complete portfolio. It has all my work in it, or at least some of my work, and you can kind of see how it goes together. I showed this to a professor when I was getting ready, and one of his comments was, it's like, oh, it's nice that you have these little folding pages, which look really cool. He said, but chances are it's going to get stuck like this, where the folding pages come out, and then somebody's going to look at it and say, wait a minute, how is this related to this? And so you have to really think about how people are going to view these pages and that sort of thing. But I think it's fun to at least include in the sample portfolios an early draft to show you that early drafts are okay, and it's worth going through that process to really dial in what's the right portfolio, what looks right for you. So when we start talking about InDesign, InDesign is a fantastic place to do this kind of layout work. When I did my grad school portfolio, InDesign was barely even in existence. I think it might have been InDesign 1, or it might still be PageMaker, I don't know. I didn't use it. I used Photoshop to do all the layout work, which was very cumbersome and very large. I had some huge files. Luckily today we have InDesign. It works much better, much cleaner, and that sort of thing. So I'm going to create a new document once again. I don't need to do a book for this. A document is just fine. You're not actually building a book. A book's a little bit more involved. It is intended for print, so I'll make sure that print is selected. Now this is where there's a kind of an important checkbox here, and that's whether you want facing pages or not. And let's see, Crystal, I'm going to use yours as the example here. Right? We have a cover, that would be page 1, and then facing pages means that you have content on both facing pages versus content. Let me dig and see if I can find one that isn't. Sorry. No, that one's facing too. A lot of people choose facing, so you got to bear with me while I get to the non-facing. All right, well, you get the idea. Apparently I can't find any non-facing pages. There we go. Here's one that's non-facing. Okay. When I open the book, the back page is white. This page has content on it. Okay, so this would be non-facing pages. So you have the ability to choose one or the other. You can, of course, change that down the road if you don't like it. If you said facing pages, then you say, wait a minute, I don't want it. It's not the end of the world. For my example, I'm going to go ahead and leave it checked for facing pages. Okay. The page size is letter. You have the option of doing any size that seems to suit you. I caution you against the 11 by 17 portfolios. They're just a little too unwieldy, and a lot of times if you go to hand that to somebody and for a job interview or whatever, they don't want it. It's too big. Depending on where you're going for school, there are certain requirements in terms of how many pages you get, what size the pages can be. When I was going to grad school, the portfolio requirements were you get 12 pieces of paper, or 12 pages, and they can be no larger than 8.5 by 11. So if you wanted a square portfolio, you could have that, but you had to cut down the page to get it. So anyway, there are restrictions, obviously, in terms of what you can have and what you can't have. But for this, we have an unlimited number of pages, and you're flexible in terms of the size that you want to create. I'm going to stick with the 8.5 by 11. Great job, projector. Okay. But I do want it in landscape orientation. It doesn't matter which orientation you pick. A lot of times portfolios tend to be in landscape for whatever reason. It's completely up to you how you want to do it. I think in this example, I even have one that's bound at the top as a different style. So people choose different things. So I'll go ahead and pick landscape orientation, and I'll go ahead and say OK. Okay, and what this does is it gives me a single page, which we're all used to seeing, but at the same time, under this pages window, right, which we haven't played around with much yet, we have page 1, and you can see that there's a longer line in the center. That's the fold of the page, right? That's the center. And so if I were to add some pages, I'm going to add pages 2 and 3, clicking on the new page icon here. There's page 2 and 3. If we look at pages 2 and 3, right, there's page 2, there's page 3. They are, let me zoom out a little bit. They are facing pages. So there's a seam in the center, right? And I have page 2 and page 3. So InDesign always starts with page 1, and then it moves on to page 2 and page 3. Okay? Odd pages are always on the right, even pages are always on the left. You can't change that. It's the way it works. Okay? So I have page 1, I have page 2, I have page 3. Now, a lot of times you'll have page 1 as being some kind of a cover, which is custom, right? And then pages 2 and 3 are kind of your introduction pages or your table of contents. There might not be anything on page number 2. So this might be a reasonable example here. Yeah, perfect. So we have a cover page, right? Then we turn on into pages 2 and 3, right? 2 is a little summary about him, right? 3 is the table of contents, and then we move into the actual project. Okay? You got a question? Okay. If you want to add a page in front of or behind, it's not a problem. Pages are reorderable. So if you put content on one page and you decide, oh, you know, really it should be further up in the portfolio, it's just as simple as dragging the pages around. So that's pages in a nutshell. A lot of times when you're working through it, there are similar pieces that appear on page after page after page. And so depending on, I'm trying to find a good example here. Okay, so I'll continue with Kyle's here. Okay, see how there's that black bar and then there's a bit of text at the end? Good. Right. I'm doing it backwards, so I'm trying to make sure. That black bar with the text at the end is exactly the same on this page. Right? And as we go through the portfolio, it's the same on each subsequent page. Right? This one gets a little bit customized because it's 2 separate pages moving on in year, but then we move right back into having multiple years. Okay? So, that being said, if we're working that way, it would be a whole lot more convenient if we could apply the stuff that repeats page after page after page to a page like a master page or a template page, something like that. InDesign calls them masters, and they're shown up above here, and they're called A master, B master, C master. Okay? So if I look up above here, right, above the pages, I have what's called A master, and that's existing. Okay? If I double click in one of the masters, I jump up into the A master pages. Generally, I like to start the A master I keep clean, and then I create a new master page, which is the B master. So once again, I just click the new page, and I start doing my initial layout work on the B master page. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'll start with, I don't know, let's do a colored box at the top of the page. Right, so I'll come across here, and actually, you know what, I want it to be a specific size, so I'll just single click. Oh, my units are off. Let me change my units. So I'll right click on the crosshairs, change to inches, and I want this to be 11 inches long, and I want the height to be 1 inch. And I don't want it to have an outline or a stroke. I want it to be filled with the color. And I don't want it to be filled with that color. I want it to be filled with kind of a nice gray. So let's do, oh, I don't know, a 60% gray. Okay. So I now have that at the top of my page. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and copy this so that it shows up on the second page. So that's Control C and then Control V, and I'll drag this over onto this page. So I end up with the gray bar here and the gray bar here, right? So that's on the page master. Okay, it's on the B master. When I go to pages 2 and 3, right, you see that there's not anything applied to those pages. Let me go ahead and create pages 4 and 5, just so we have an example here. And in the upper corner of each of these pages, there's a little tiny A. Okay? And that means that the A master has been applied to these pages. If I want to change that, right, so on pages 4 and 5 I want to change that, I can go ahead and select the two pages. So I have them both selected. I held down Shift to select them. And I'm going to right click and say Apply Master to Pages. And I'll pick the B master. And as soon as I do that, right, the content that was on the B master page shows up, right, on pages 4 and 5. Okay, they have the B master applied. If I go to the A, pages 2 and 3, there's nothing applied. It's just a blank page. Okay? So the nice thing about this is if I make some adjustments, like here, oh no, there's a little bit of a white line at the end of my bar here across the top. Let me go back up to the master. I can select the object and let me drag that out to make sure it goes all the way. Make sure that side's okay. Alright, sounds good. If I wanted to change the height of these, I could adjust those in the master as well, and it automatically applies back down to pages 4 and 5 here. There it is fixed. Okay? So let's say that I wanted to add another gray bar to this master, and we'll put a gray bar on this side that overlaps a little bit. Let me go ahead and create a new bar, and this one I'm going to say is going to be 2 inches wide by 8.5 inches tall. I'd say okay, there it is. Again, I don't want it to have, I want it to be a solid fill without an outline, and we want it to have some transparency. So let me go over to the effects, change that opacity down, maybe something like that. Okay, and again, I'm completely making this up as I go along. You'll spend a little bit more time designing this, but now I have those two gray bars assigned, and if I jump over to my pages here and I look at page 5, it has that same content on it. One of the other things that's important to recognize is on the page themselves, you cannot select any of this content, right? Because it's applied to the master, not applied to the page itself. Okay? So I can take this even further and say that I want to create my frames on this page. So let's say that I create a frame that looks like that, and on the back side here bear with me for just a second longer. Okay, so I created some frames like that. When I go to pages 4 and 5, I now have those frames. Again, I can't select the frames, but I can use those to place images. So if I go to File and then Place, remember this is happening on the pages themselves, not on the master. Let me go ahead and we'll pick piece, and then I'll click on top of that frame, and then I can right click and go to Fitting, and we can fill frame proportionally, and that shows up. Okay. Likewise, I can continue and place more images. Let me go to File and then Place. Okay, you guys get the idea. Okay, when I go to create a new page, right, pages 6 and 7, those got out of order here. There we go. So I had 5 and 6. Okay, 6 and 7 again have the same frames applied. Okay, if I don't like these frames, I can duplicate the master. Let me right click and say Duplicate Master. And I could say that on the C master, I want these two frames to go together. And when I come down here, I can right click and apply the C master. Okay, and now it's that layout. Okay. Now the one thing that doesn't work well is text. We can create a text frame on one of the masters. Let's say that I want a text frame something like this, because I'm going to write a little bit of information there. We'll leave it as just a frame. When we come down to C, yeah, it's right there. Let's see master. This one still has B applied. Let me right click and say apply master to pages. C master. Say okay. Okay, it has the little bit of text there. The problem is if I just click on the text tool and try to type inside it, it won't let me. Okay, I have to place the text in, just like an image. So I can do that, but it's a little bit more work because you have to have a reference file. You have to have a Word file or something like that. So one of the things that I recommend with text is instead of placing it on the master, right? I'm going to copy it. Place it on the page itself. Let me go ahead and delete it off this page here. And I'll paste it and we'll align it here. Now one of the advantages though is I can take something like this and on a separate page, let's say I want to make it onto page 5, I can go to edit and then copy, and when I go to page 5 and I go to edit, I'm going to select paste in place rather than just paste, and it will place it in exactly the same place that it was on page 7 on page 5. So with text it's easier to copy and paste. With other layout stuff like the gray bars and stuff, that's better to go into the masters. Okay. Now we're having a little problem here where my image that I placed is on top of that gray bar, and this happens sometimes during the layout work, and I'm going to solve that by adjusting layers. And so we haven't gotten into layers too much in InDesign, but I at least want to introduce that today as well. Right now I have layer 1, which is where all the content is. If I create a new layer, right, it's going to be called layer 2, and because layer 2 is on top of layer 1, all objects that are on layer 2 will be on top of all objects that are on layer 1. So let me go ahead and go back to pages, and let me go to my masters, and I'm going to change this gray bar, this gray bar, I hope. Select them both. There we go. And we'll also select this gray bar. Oh, my shift key is not working on the keyboard. There we go. So I have gray bar, and gray bar. I'm going to go to my layers. Right now they're on layer 1. There's a little blue square that identifies that they're on layer 1 here at the end of my layer. I'm going to drag that little blue square up onto layer 2. The blue square changes to red because layer 2's color is red. My objects also turn red. Okay? And now if I go back to page 4, we can see that that gray bar is in fact on top of my image. Okay? And maybe at this point we're saying, it's not quite dark enough. I'd like it to be a little bit darker. Let me go ahead and jump up to my B master. We're going to change the opacity of this layer. And let me also do it on the C master. And now if I go to the pages themselves, we can see that that gray bar shows up a little bit better. Okay? So what I'm doing is doing a lot of the layout work on the masters to be applied to all of the pages. Now another great thing that can be applied via the masters is things like page numbers. And so we'll show you that right now. I'm going to use the C master here as the example page number. And what I'll do is I'll create a text box. And we'll put it down here at the bottom. Right, something like that. And unfortunately the text box is on the blue layer, so I need to move it up onto the red layer. There we go. And we'll make the red layer active for right now. Now let me zoom in on this a little bit so I can make some adjustments. All right. So whatever I type into this box, if I use the text tool, whatever I type into this box is going to show up. So let's say, so if I said page 1, for example, right, that's going to show up on anything that has the C master applied to it. This one doesn't, so let's right click and say apply master to pages and put the C master on it. So if I can click correctly, there you go. And see how page 1 shows up? Okay, that's going to show up on every page that has the C master applied. Now unfortunately, I don't want to have a separate master for every page, right? So I'd like it to automatically add in that information for me. So let me jump up to the C master, and instead of typing page 1, I'm going to select the 1, and I'm going to go up to the type menu, and I'm going to say insert special character, markers, current page number. Okay, and so it enters right now what's called what's a C because it's the C master. But if I go to page 5, it now says page 5. If I go to page 7, it now says page 7. Right? So it's a pretty intuitive, convenient way of assigning page numbers to pages. Now maybe I don't want it to actually say page 7, right? So maybe I just want a page number. So let's get rid of this. I have just this, and I want it to go to the right. I want to change my font to something else. Right? I could even change my size. And let me go ahead and move this down a little bit. And now if I go back, right, there's my page number, there's my page number. Okay? If I don't like the color, I can do this, go back up to the master, once again select it, and I can say I don't want it to be black, I want it to be white. Okay? And then it will apply to each of the page numbers as a white number. Okay? So that works quite conveniently. It's a great way of working through your pages and that sort of thing. And adding page numbers. Now, there's a more sophisticated level to this, and sometimes it's easier if I jump for a second and show you kind of a more established InDesign document. Okay. So I switched over into InDesign, and what I pulled up was the book that I wrote for the class. And this I want to show you kind of a more sophisticated understanding. So once again, I have a bunch of masters that have been applied to these pages. If we look at the C master, for example, we look down at the bottom, right? I say that it's available for Mac and Windows. It has something called a section here, and then it says C. So if we look to a page that has the C master applied to it, right, we see that this is Photoshop page 37. The 37 automatically comes in. It still says Mac and Windows, but what was called section is now replaced with Photoshop. Okay? If I continue down here a little bit further and we move into InDesign, for example, right, page 75 now, it also says InDesign. And so I do that with something called a section marker. And if we go back to the place where the book changes from Photoshop to InDesign, so here's the end of Photoshop. Let me zoom out a little bit. And we move into the InDesign section. Okay, there's a little triangle that's up on top of this page, okay, because that's the transition point when it goes from one to the other. And if I right-click on that page and I go to Numbering and Section Options, you can see that I have, in this instance, started a section, so it's checked. I have automatic page numbering, which means it's just going to continue from the last page number, which is how I want it, right? But down here under section marker, I've typed in InDesign. I also have a section prefix of ID, just so that I can tell. You can see it says PS, and down here it says ID. Just reference-wise, I can tell what page is on what page. But I've produced the section marker here, and it says InDesign. Okay. Now, what I've said on the master, if we jump up to master, let me zoom in here a little bit. I've said that not only do I want the, right here under C, do I want the page number, so I inserted special character markers current page number, right? Right here, where it says section, I went up to type, I went to insert special character, and I said this is, right, a section marker, right? And so that fills in whatever section this particular of the book it is. It's kind of like doing a chapter. So it ends up being a really easy, convenient way of adding a little bit more data automatically to every page. Okay? Is it maybe a little excessive for a portfolio? Could you just type it in? Sure. That might be the better strategy. Okay? But at least I want to point out that that is an option when you're creating these kinds of things. Okay? So lines, page numbers, that sort of thing should always take place up on the masters. You can see that you can end up with a fairly complex set of masters to be applied to different pages, and then your multiple pages work together throughout the rest of your process here. Okay, so I'm going to turn you loose. I think I've showed you everything I need to show you. Hold on a second, let me just double check. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay, so continue on, work on your portfolio today. You're responsible for 2 pages. You've completed your assignment 101 and your assignment 102. Those are 2 pieces of content that you can add. If you've worked in another architecture class, or you have artwork that you've done in an art class, or any of those kinds of things, by all means you should include it in this portfolio. It's not just this class. If you've never done any architecture work, and you don't have to fabricate something done outside the class. The minimum is what's in the class. The assignments are the minimum part. If you want to include your exercises, that's fine as well. You will probably get to a point down the road when you do some SketchUp modeling and you do some sections and stuff where you want to include your exercises as well as your assignments. So I will turn you loose from here. Please do spend some time and look at the sample portfolios. This will not be the last day that I bring them in. I will bring the whole grouping in again when we get a little bit closer to the end. Some of the newer portfolios also have sticky notes in the back that say where people bound them and how much it costs to be made. So you can use those as reference. Older portfolios don't have that information. It's something I changed to be included in the newer stuff so that you guys have that as reference. Okay? Are there any questions about this? No? Good. Remember, you do have your assignment 103. Your posters is due on Wednesday. So if you need a little extra time, today's a good day to work on that as well. On Wednesday, we're actually going to move out of InDesign and into Illustrator. So things move rather quickly from here on out. And we'll do some Illustrator stuff. We'll, of course, come back to InDesign many more times throughout the semester.